The sound of a gunshot echoed through the rail car as Tessa Jameson's trembling fingers fumbled with the window latch. Her heart hammered in her chest, drowning out the rhythmic clacking of wheels against steel rails. Montana territory, 1885, and she was certain she wouldn't live to see another sunrise if she remained in the clutches of Silas Blackstone, the man who had purchased her from her stepfather for the price of a gambling debt. "You ain't going nowhere, girl," Silas growled, his boot heels thudding heavily against the wooden floor as he approached from the far end of the private car. "Paid good money for you, and what Silas buys, Silas keeps." Tessa finally worked the latch free, the rush of cold night air hitting her face as she pushed the window open. The moonlit landscape rushed past in a blur of silver-tipped pines and rocky outcroppings. Freedom was just beyond that window, but it came with a terrible price. The train was moving fast, too fast for any sane person to consider jumping. But Tessa wasn't feeling particularly sane at that moment. "Don't you dare!" Silas roared, lunging toward her. In that instant, Tessa made her choice. Death by fall was preferable to the life awaiting her at the end of this journey. She squeezed through the window, her cotton dress snagging on the frame as the wind tore at her hair. For one terrifying moment, she was suspended between the train and the void, and then she pushed away with all her strength. The world spun violently as she plummeted toward the ground. Tessa closed her eyes, preparing for the impact that would end her life. Instead, she felt strong arms wrap around her body, taking the brunt of the fall as they rolled together down a gentle embankment. Pain shot through her shoulder and hip, but she was alive impossibly, miraculously alive. "What in tarnation were you thinking?" a deep voice demanded, his breath warm against her ear. Tessa opened her eyes to find herself cradled against a broad chest, looking up into the most startlingly blue eyes she'd ever seen, framed by a weathered face beneath a worn Stetson. I had to escape," she managed, her voice barely audible over the fading rumble of the train. "Well, miss," the stranger said, still holding her securely, "I reckon you just did." The cowboy who had caught her mid-fall gently helped Tessa to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. Her legs felt like water beneath her, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "Name's Adam Zachary," he said, retrieving his hat, which had fallen during their tumble. "And you are?" "Tessa," she replied, glancing nervously back at the train, now just a distant set of lights in the night. "Tessa Jameson." Adam dusted off his denim pants and assessed her with a critical eye. "You're hurt." Tessa touched her forehead, feeling a warm trickle of blood. "It's nothing compared to what awaited me on that train." The cowboy's expression hardened. "Someone chasing you?" "A man named Silas Blackstone," she admitted, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. "My stepfather lost me in a poker game 3 days ago. Silas was taking me to his ranch near Butte." Adam's jaw tightened. "Lost you in a poker game? What kind of man?" He cut himself off, shaking his head. "Never mind that now. We need to get you somewhere safe. Blackstone's not the type to let property slip through his fingers, especially the kind that wears skirts." His words might have offended her under different circumstances, but Tessa recognized the truth in them. "Will he stop the train?" "Not likely tonight. Too dangerous to halt on this stretch. But come morning, he'll start looking." Adam glanced around, getting his bearings. "My camp's about a mile south of here. Can you walk that far?" Tessa straightened her spine. "I can walk as far as necessary to stay free, Mr. Zachary." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Just Adam will do." He removed his coat and draped it around her shoulders. The weight and warmth of it enveloped her immediately, carrying the scent of leather, horses, and wood smoke. "Thank you," she said, drawing it closer. "For catching me. For this. For everything." Adam merely nodded and gestured toward a narrow trail leading away from the tracks. "This way. Watch your step. It's rough country, even in daylight." They walked in silence for several minutes, Adam occasionally reaching back to offer his hand over particularly treacherous patches. Tessa tried to ignore the pain in her ankle and the stinging cuts on her palms, focusing instead on the vast starry sky above them. "How did you happen to be there?" she finally asked. "Right when I needed someone?" Adam glanced back at her. "Wasn't coincidence, if that's what you're thinking. I spotted Blackstone boarding at Elk Ridge with a woman who didn't look too pleased to be in his company. I know his reputation. He paused, helping her over a fallen log. When the train slowed on the grade, I decided to track alongside for a spell, just to keep an eye out. Good thing I did. You were following the train on horseback? In the dark? Moon's bright enough, he said simply, and Thunder knows this country better than most men. As if on cue, a soft nickering came from ahead of them, and they rounded a bend to find a magnificent black stallion ground-tied beside a small, neatly arranged camp. A low fire cast a warm glow over a bedroll and minimal supplies. "It's not much," Adam said, leading her toward the fire, "but it's out of the wind." Tessa sank gratefully onto a fallen log near the flames. "It's perfect." Adam busied himself adding wood to the fire and retrieving a canteen. He handed it to her, then crouched to examine her injured ankle. "May I?" he asked, hands hovering above her boot. Tessa nodded, wincing as he gently removed the footwear and rolled down her stocking to reveal swollen flesh. "Sprained, not broken," he pronounced after careful examination. "Still, you won't be walking far tomorrow." "I can't stay in one place," Tessa said, fear edging back into her voice. "Silas will find me." Adam rewrapped her ankle with practiced efficiency. "We'll leave at first light, head deeper into the hills. I know places Blackstone and his men won't think to look." He straightened up. "Are you hungry?" Her stomach answered with an embarrassing growl. Adam's mouth quirked up at the corner as he moved to his saddlebag and returned with jerky and hardtack. "Trail rations," he apologized, "but filling enough." "I haven't eaten since yesterday," Tessa admitted, accepting the simple fare with gratitude. As she ate, Adam settled across from her, the firelight casting shadows across his features. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with the lean, muscled build of a man who spent his life outdoors. His face bore the weathering of sun and wind, but his eyes remained keen and alert. "Where were you headed before your unexpected detour?" Tessa asked. "Fort Benton," he replied. "Got business with the territorial marshal there." "You're a lawman?" Adam's expression shuddered slightly. "Sometimes. Mostly I track people who don't want to be found." "A bounty hunter," Tessa said, understanding dawning. "I prefer retrieval specialist," he said with a hint of humor. "Pays better when you sound fancy." Tessa studied him. "And are you tracking someone now?" "Not at the moment." He poked at the fire. "Just delivered a bank robber to Helena 2 days back. Was heading to Fort Benton to collect my fee and maybe pick up another assignment." "I'm sorry to have interrupted your journey." Adam shook his head. "Don't be. Some things are more important than bounties." They fell silent again, the crackling of the fire and distant call of an owl the only sounds in the night. Tessa felt exhaustion washing over her in waves, the events of the past days catching up to her all at once. "You should rest," Adam said, noticing her drooping eyelids. "Take my bedroll. I'll keep watch." "I can't take your bed," she protested. "I've slept on harder ground for less worthy reasons," he insisted, already spreading the bedroll closer to the fire for her. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow will come early enough." Too tired to argue further, Tessa limped to the offered bedding and sank down gratefully. The last thing she remembered before sleep claimed her was Adam's steady presence across the fire, his silhouette a comforting sentinel against the darkness beyond. Dawn arrived with a palette of pinks and golds painting the eastern sky. Tessa woke disoriented, momentarily confused by the pine-scented air and birdsong replacing the train's rumble. Memory rushed back as she spotted Adam, crouched by a small fire, coffee pot nestled in the coals. "Morning," he said, noticing her stirring. "How's the ankle?" Tessa flexed it cautiously. "Still painful, but better than last night." "Good, we've got ground to cover." He poured steaming coffee into a tin cup and offered it to her. "It's strong enough to float a horseshoe, but it'll wake you up." The bitter brew warmed her from the inside out. As she drank, Adam efficiently broke down the camp, leaving scarcely a trace of their presence. "Where are we headed?" she asked, struggling to her feet. "My cabin. It's a day's ride from here, tucked away in a box canyon where the Blackfoot rarely venture and white men never go." He led Thunder over to her. "You'll ride, I'll walk." Tessa shook her head. "I can't take your horse while you walk." "Thunder can't carry us both all day, not in this terrain," he said practically. "And you can't walk on that ankle. So, unless you've got a better suggestion, up you go. Recognizing the logic, Tessa allowed him to help her mount. The stallion stood perfectly still, displaying the exceptional training that spoke volumes about his owner's care. They set off as the sun cleared the eastern ridge, Adam leading Thunder on a winding path that seemed to deliberately avoid open spaces and high ground. They traveled in companionable silence for the most part, Adam occasionally pointing out landmarks or wildlife. By midday, they had covered significant distance, the railroad far behind them. During a brief rest by a small stream, Tessa finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had been nagging at her. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, as Adam refilled the canteen. "You don't know me. I could be lying about everything." Adam straightened, studying her thoughtfully. "Are you?" "No," she admitted. "But you had no way of knowing that." He shrugged. "I've spent most of my life reading people, Miss Jameson. Had to, in my line of work. You learn to tell who's running from justice and who's running from injustice." He met her gaze directly. No woman jumps from a moving train unless what awaits her is worse than the fall. Tessa looked down at her hands. "My mother died last winter. Fever. My stepfather wasted no time putting me to work in his tavern. When that didn't bring enough coin, he started encouraging customers to take liberties." Her voice thickened. "When I fought back, he decided I was more trouble than I was worth. So when Silas Blackstone showed interest during a poker game 3 nights ago, my stepfather put me up as collateral." Adam's expression darkened. "And Blackstone won. He claimed he was taking me to be his housekeeper at his ranch outside Butte," Tessa continued. "But the way he looked at me, the things he said when we were alone," she shuddered. "I knew what he really intended. Blackstone's got a reputation," Adam acknowledged grimly. "Owns half the mining claims around Butte, runs them with what amounts to slave labor. Word is, women don't last long at his ranch." "I would have died there," Tessa said quietly, "or wished I had." Adam approached, crouching before her. "Look at me, Miss Jameson." She raised her eyes to his. "I give you my word, as long as I draw breath, Silas Blackstone won't lay a hand on you again." The fierce conviction in his voice sent warmth spreading through Tessa's chest. For the first time since her mother's death, she felt something dangerously close to hope. "Thank you," she whispered. Adam stood, offering his hand to help her up. "We should keep moving. Still have a ways to go before nightfall." As the day wore on, the landscape grew increasingly wild. They left the pine forest behind, ascending into rugged terrain where jagged rocks punctuated sparse vegetation. Thunder picked his way carefully through the difficult passage, Adam never leaving his side. By late afternoon, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. "Storm's coming," Adam observed, squinting at the sky. "We need to push harder if we're going to reach shelter before it hits." They quickened their pace as much as the terrain allowed. The air grew heavy with the scent of impending rain, and distant thunder rolled across the mountains. Tessa could feel Adam's growing tension, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "There," he finally said, pointing to a narrow gap between towering rock formations. "That's the entrance to the canyon." As they approached the passage, Adam suddenly tensed, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "What is it?" Tessa whispered. "Not sure," he murmured. "Something doesn't feel right." He led Thunder off the trail, guiding them behind an outcropping of rocks just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. From this vantage point, they had a clear view of the canyon entrance without being visible themselves. "There," Adam breathed, pointing to a faint trace of smoke rising from within the canyon. "Could it be neighbors?" Tessa suggested hopefully. Adam shook his head. "I don't have neighbors, not within 20 miles. The implications settled heavily between them. Someone was at Adam's cabin, someone who had no business being there. "Blackstone?" Tessa asked, fear constricting her throat. "Impossible," Adam assured her. "Even if he started tracking us at first light, he couldn't have gotten ahead of us." He frowned, thinking. "More likely squatters or maybe deserters from the fort. Either way, we can't risk the canyon until we know who we're dealing with." As if to punctuate his words, the skies opened in earnest, rain cascading down in silver sheets. Adam quickly helped Tessa dismount and led her and Thunder to a small overhang in the rock face that offered minimal shelter. "We'll wait out the worst of it here," he said, removing a slicker from his saddlebag and wrapping it around Tessa's shoulders. Then, I'll go scout ahead after dark. They huddled together in the cramped space, Thunder standing protectively at the opening, his massive body blocking some of the wind and rain. Despite her fear and the discomfort, Tessa found herself acutely aware of Adam's proximity, the warmth of his body, a stark contrast to the cold stone at her back. "Tell me about your cabin," she said, trying to distract herself from both their predicament and her unexpected awareness of him. Adam settled more comfortably beside her. "It's not much to speak of. Built it myself 4 years back. 1 room, stone chimney, good tight roof. Got a small corral for Thunder, and a creek runs nearby for water." "Sounds lovely," Tessa said sincerely. "Peaceful." "It is that," Adam agreed. "Don't spend as much time there as I'd like, given my work, but it's good to have a place that's just mine." "I've never had that," Tessa admitted. "Something that was truly mine. Even before my mother died, we lived in my stepfather's house, by his rules." "What would you want?" Adam asked. "If you could have anything?" Tessa considered the question. "A small house, I think, with a garden, books, maybe a cat or 2. She smiled faintly. "Simple things." "Nothing simple about wanting to be free and having something to call your own," Adam said. "That's what most folks are fighting for out here." "What about you?" Tessa asked. "Why the life of a bounty hunter? It seems lonely." Adam was quiet for a long moment. "It is," he finally acknowledged. "But I'm good at it. And there's satisfaction in bringing men to justice who think they're beyond the law's reach." "Is that why you started? For justice?" His jaw tightened. "Started for vengeance. My younger brother was killed by road agents when we were heading west. I tracked them for 6 months before I caught up. By then, I discovered I had a knack for finding people who didn't want to be found." He shrugged. "Marshall and Cheyenne offered me a job after that. Rest just followed." "I'm sorry about your brother," Tessa said softly. "Was a long time ago," Adam replied, but the pain in his voice suggested otherwise. They fell silent, listening to the rain drumming against the rocks and the occasional rumble of thunder. Gradually, the storm began to abate, the downpour softening to a steady patter. Darkness was falling rapidly. "Stay here with Thunder," Adam instructed, checking his revolver. "I'm going to have a look at who's made themselves at home in my cabin." "Be careful," Tessa urged, suddenly afraid for him. Adam's eyes softened momentarily. "Always am." He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that seemed almost tender before slipping away into the gathering darkness. Alone with Thunder, Tessa strained her ears for any sound beyond the rain. The stallion stood alert, his ears pricked forward, occasionally nickering softly as if to reassure her. Time stretched impossibly as minutes felt like hours. Finally, when Tessa had nearly convinced herself something terrible had happened, a shadow detached itself from the greater darkness outside their shelter. "It's just me," Adam's voice came softly before she could panic. "What did you find?" she asked, as he ducked back under the overhang, water dripping from his hat and coat. "2 men," he reported grimly. "Recognize them, Harris brothers, cattle rustlers I brought in last year. Must have served their time and gotten released. Are they looking for you? For revenge?" Adam shook his head. "Don't think so. They're just using the cabin as a convenient hideout. Probably working their way north to Canada." He grimaced. "Found evidence they've been busy on their journey. Fresh cattle brands in my fireplace. They're still in the business." "What do we do now?" "We can't stay here," Adam decided. "Storm's passing. We'll circle around, head east. I know a line shack about 10 miles from here. Not comfortable, but it'll keep us dry for the night." "And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow we decide how to handle the Harris brothers," he said. "I can't let them keep stealing honest ranchers' stock. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe." They set off in the light rain, Adam again leading Thunder with Tessa mounted. The darkness made travel slow and treacherous, but Adam navigated with uncanny confidence. By the time they reached the line shack, Tessa was shivering with cold and exhaustion, her clothes soaked despite the slicker. The shack was little more than 4 walls and a roof, abandoned by whatever ranch had once used it for outlying hands. Adam quickly got a fire started in the small iron stove, while Tessa huddled nearby, teeth chattering. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," Adam said practically, digging through his saddlebags. "I don't have much that would fit you, but this might help. He produced a clean flannel shirt that looked enormous compared to her slight frame. Tessa took it gratefully. "Turn around?" Adam obliged, busying himself with unsaddling Thunder and bringing the gear inside while Tessa struggled out of her sodden dress and into the dry shirt. It hung nearly to her knees, the sleeves dangling well past her fingertips, but the relief of dry clothing was immediate and profound. "I've hung my dress by the stove," she announced when she was decent. Adam turned, his expression carefully neutral, as he took in her appearance, though something flickered briefly in his eyes. "Should dry by morning?" he said, his voice oddly gruff. He cleared his throat. "You should try to sleep. Take the bedroll. I'll keep watch." "You need rest too," Tessa protested, "and there's room for both of us if we're careful." A tense silence followed her suggestion. "I don't think that's wise, Miss Jameson," Adam finally said. "We're both adults," Tessa replied reasonably. "And it's just sleeping. I trust you, Adam." Something in his expression softened at her words. "Very well," he conceded, "but only because you need the warmth." They arranged themselves awkwardly on the narrow bedroll, back to back, a careful distance between them, despite the close quarters. Tessa could feel the rigid tension in Adam's body, his determination to maintain propriety even in these unusual circumstances. "Good night, Adam," she whispered, "and thank you, again, for everything." There was a pause before he responded, his voice low in the darkness. "Sleep well, Tessa." Despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive. Tessa was acutely aware of Adam's presence, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the solid strength of him just inches away. She wondered at the strange twist of fate that had brought her from the nightmare of Silas Blackstone's clutches to this moment, sharing shelter with a man who had literally caught her as she fell. Eventually, the warmth and the sound of rain pattering against the roof lulled her into slumber. Her last conscious thought was that for the first time in months, she felt safe. Tessa woke to soft morning light filtering through cracks in the shack's walls. She was alone on the bedroll, but the stove still radiated heat, indicating Adam hadn't been gone long. Her dress, now dry, had been carefully laid out beside her. Quickly donning her own clothes, Tessa stepped outside to find Adam returning from a nearby stream, canteen freshly filled. Thunder grazed contentedly on the sparse grass nearby. "Morning," Adam greeted her. "How's the ankle?" Tessa tested her weight on it. "Better, still sore, but I can walk on it now." "Good. We've got decisions to make." He offered her the canteen and some jerky. "Not much of a breakfast, but it'll hold us till we find better." As they ate, Adam outlined their situation. "We're about 15 miles from the nearest ranch. Man named McPherson owns it. Good man, wife's even better. They'd take you in while I deal with the Harris brothers." "Deal with them how?" Tessa asked warily. "Ideally, I'd bring them in alive," Adam said. "There's likely warrants out on them already for the cattle they've stolen between prison and my cabin. But they're dangerous men, and they won't come quietly." "You mean to face them alone? 2 against 1? Adam shrugged. "Wouldn't be the first time." "It could be the last," Tessa said sharply. "Why not get help? Surely there's a marshal or sheriff nearby." "Nearest law is in Fort Benton, 2 days' ride from here," Adam explained. "By then, the Harris brothers could be in Canada, and every day they remain free is another day they're stealing honest ranchers' livelihood." "There must be another way," Tessa insisted. "One that doesn't risk your life." Adam studied her with a curious expression. "You're worried about me." "Of course I am." The vehemence in her voice surprised them both. More calmly, she added, "You've done nothing but help me since the moment we met. I don't want to see you hurt because of some misplaced sense of duty." "It's not misplaced," Adam said quietly. "It's who I am, Tessa. What I do. And who will catch the next desperate woman who jumps from a train if you're killed over stolen cattle?" she challenged. That gave him pause. A complicated series of emotions played across his features before he nodded slowly. "You make a fair point," he acknowledged. "What would you suggest instead?" Tessa considered. "You said these men don't know you're aware of them, correct? They think your cabin is safely abandoned?" "Far as they know, yes." "Then we have the advantage of surprise," Tessa said, thinking aloud. "What if we use that? Set a trap of some kind?" "We?" Adam echoed, eyebrows rising. There is no we in this, Miss Jameson. I'm taking you to McPherson's, where you'll be safe. And if Silas Blackstone is already searching the area, what then? Tessa countered. The safest place for me is with you, and you know it. Adam ran a hand through his hair in frustration. You're asking me to put you in danger. I'm asking you to let me help, Tessa corrected. 2 against 1 are poor odds. 2 against 2 evens them considerably. You're not a fighter, Adam protested. No, Tessa agreed, but I am clever and motivated. She met his gaze steadily. I know you want to protect me, Adam, but I've spent my whole life having decisions made for me. Please, let this one be mine. Adam fell silent, clearly torn between his instinct to keep her safe and his respect for her autonomy. Finally, he sighed. All right, he conceded. We'll try it your way. But at the first sign of real trouble, you run. No heroics, promise me that. I promise, Tessa agreed solemnly. They spent the next hour formulating a plan. The Harris brothers, according to Adam's reconnaissance, seemed to be using his cabin as a base of operations, riding out during the day to scout nearby ranches, presumably for cattle to steal. If we can catch them separated, our odds improve significantly, Adam explained. From what I saw yesterday, they leave one man at the cabin while the other scouts. So we wait for one to leave, then approach the cabin, Tessa suggested. Adam nodded slowly. It could work, but we need to be careful. These men aren't just thieves, they're killers when cornered. They set off toward the canyon, circling wide to approach from the opposite direction of the line shack. Adam insisted Tessa ride Thunder while he walked alongside, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings for any sign of pursuit, either from the Harris brothers or, more concerningly, Silas Blackstone. Do you think he's looking for me? Tessa asked as they paused on a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of territory. Adam surveyed the landscape. Blackstone, without a doubt. Man like that doesn't let go of what he considers his property. He glanced at her. But he won't find you, not out here. How can you be so certain? Because I know this country better than most men alive, Adam said simply. And because I won't let him have you. There was something in his voice, a fierce protectiveness that went beyond duty or kindness that made Tessa's heart beat faster. She looked away, unsure how to respond to the intensity of his declaration. By mid-afternoon, they had reached a vantage point overlooking Adam's cabin. Concealed among boulders, they watched as 2 men moved around the small clearing. Even from a distance, Tessa could see they were rough-looking characters, with unkempt beards and the watchful manner of men accustomed to looking over their shoulders. That's them, Adam confirmed. Ezra's the taller one, meaner of the 2. Floyd's not as quick with a gun, but he's crafty. As they watched, the brothers appeared to argue briefly before Ezra mounted a sorrel gelding and rode out of the canyon, heading north. He'll be gone till sundown, Adam observed. That gives us our window. Their plan was simple but risky. Adam would approach the cabin directly, keeping Floyd's attention, while Tessa circled around to the back. Once Adam had Floyd engaged, Tessa would slip inside through the rear window and secure the brothers' weapons, giving Adam the advantage he needed. Remember, Adam said as they prepared to separate. If anything goes wrong, I run, Tessa finished. I remember. Adam hesitated, then reached out to touch her cheek briefly. Be careful. You too, she whispered, her skin tingling where his fingers had brushed. They parted ways, Tessa circling wide through the underbrush while Adam approached more directly, leading Thunder in plain sight. From her position, Tessa could see the moment Floyd noticed Adam's approach. The rustler stepped onto the cabin's small porch, hand hovering near his holstered pistol. Howdy there, Adam called casually. This your place? Who's asking? Floyd replied warily. Name's Zachary, Adam answered, stopping Thunder at a respectable distance. Adam Zachary, I'm looking for a man named Harris, told he might be in these parts. Floyd's posture stiffened visibly. What business you got with Harris? Message from his wife back in Helena, Adam improvised smoothly. She's ailing. Thought he'd want to know. Tessa held her breath as she crept toward the back of the cabin. Adam was taking a tremendous risk, giving his real name to a man who must surely remember the bounty hunter who had sent him to prison. But the gamble seemed to be paying off. Floyd was clearly rattled, but hadn't yet recognized Adam beneath the stubble of several days' growth and the shadow of his hat brim. Reaching the small window at the rear of the cabin, Tessa peered cautiously inside. The interior was a single room, simply furnished but now in disarray from the brothers' occupation. 2 bedrolls lay on the floor, and a collection of weapons was piled on a rough-hewn table, revolvers, rifles, and a shotgun. Carefully, Tessa worked the window open and pulled herself inside, wincing as her injured ankle protested. She could hear Adam and Floyd still talking outside, Adam skillfully keeping the rustler engaged with fabricated details about a non-existent wife. Moving as quietly as possible, Tessa gathered the weapons from the table. There were more than she could easily carry, so she focused on removing the ammunition instead, emptying chambers and pocketing cartridges. She had just finished with the last revolver when a floorboard creaked beneath her foot. The conversation outside stopped abruptly. "Someone in there?" Floyd called sharply. "Just us out here," Adam replied, his voice carrying a warning that told Tessa he knew her position was compromised. Heart pounding, Tessa scrambled back toward the window as boots thudded on the porch steps. She was halfway through the opening when the door burst open behind her. "What the?" Floyd sputtered, lunging toward her. Outside, Adam shouted, "Tessa, run!" She tumbled through the window, landing hard on the ground outside as a gunshot exploded from within the cabin. Scrambling to her feet, Tessa raced toward the cover of nearby rocks, expecting a bullet in her back at any moment. Instead, she heard a commotion behind her, the sounds of a struggle, another shot, then silence. Tessa froze, torn between her promise to run and her need to know what had happened to Adam. Before she could decide, a voice called out, "It's clear, Tessa. He's down." Relief flooded through her as she turned to see Adam standing in the cabin doorway, a bleeding cut across his forehead, but otherwise unharmed. Floyd Harris lay motionless on the floor behind him. "Is he?" she asked, approaching cautiously. "Knocked out," Adam assured her. "Bullet grazed his shoulder when we struggled, but he hit his head on the table going down. He'll live to stand trial." He examined her anxiously. "You're not hurt?" Tessa shook her head. "Just frightened." Adam's expression softened. "You did well. Got all their ammunition, I see." "I tried," she said, producing the handful of cartridges from her pocket. "I didn't expect him to hear me." "Old cabins have noisy floors," Adam said, taking the ammunition. "It was a good plan, though. Better than storming in alone would have been." He busied himself securing Floyd with rope from his saddlebags, binding the unconscious man's hands and feet. Tessa watched him work, admiring the efficiency of his movements. "What about the other brother?" she asked. "Ezra? He'll be back by sunset," Adam said grimly. "And when he finds his brother trussed up like a holiday turkey, he won't be in a charitable mood." "So, we set another trap," Tessa suggested. Adam nodded approvingly. "My thinking exactly." They prepared carefully, dragging Floyd to a corner where he wouldn't be immediately visible from the doorway. Adam positioned himself behind the door, while Tessa would wait in the cabin's single small bedroom, out of the line of fire, but ready to create a distraction if needed. As the afternoon waned toward evening, tension mounted. Floyd had regained consciousness and now glared at them sullenly from his position on the floor, refusing to speak, despite Adam's questioning about their recent activities. "Doesn't matter," Adam finally said. "We caught you red-handed with stolen cattle brands. That's enough to send you back to territorial prison for a good long stretch." Finally, as the sun dipped toward the western peaks, they heard the approach of a horse. Adam signaled Tessa to take her position in the bedroom. She slipped inside, leaving the door cracked just enough to see through. "Floyd," Ezra's voice called from outside. "Got us a fine steer spotted over at the Peterson spread. Easy pickings tonight." The cabin door swung open, and Ezra Harris stepped inside, momentarily backlit by the setting sun. It took his eyes a second to adjust to the dimmer interior, a second too long. Adam moved with lightning speed, bringing his pistol down hard on the back of Ezra's head. The larger man crumpled to the floor with a groan. "That was almost too easy," Adam remarked, quickly binding Ezra's wrists. "Don't get cocky," Tessa warned, emerging from the bedroom. "We still need to get them to Fort Benton, and that's 2 days' ride with 2 prisoners. Adam gave her an approving look. "You're thinking like a bounty hunter now." "Heaven forbid," Tessa replied with a small smile. They spent the night in the cabin, taking turns keeping watch over their prisoners. Adam insisted Tessa take the bed, while he settled into a chair near the brothers, his revolver close at hand. Despite her exhaustion, Tessa found sleep elusive, her mind replaying the events of the day and the risks Adam had taken. She was also uncomfortably aware that they hadn't discussed what would happen after the Harris brothers were delivered to justice. Would Adam expect her to stay at this McPherson ranch he'd mentioned? Would he continue on with his bounty-hunting life? The uncertainty of her future loomed large in the darkness. Morning brought practical concerns that pushed aside such questions. They needed to transport 2 unwilling prisoners across difficult terrain, with limited supplies and the constant threat of Silas Blackstone potentially searching for them. "We'll take their horses," Adam decided after a sparse breakfast. "You'll ride Thunder. I'll take Ezra's sorrel. We'll put Floyd on his own horse and tie Ezra behind him." "Won't that slow us down considerably?" Tessa asked. "Better slow than sorry," Adam replied. "If we put them both on one horse and they manage to get free somehow, we'd have a serious problem." The journey to Fort Benton proved every bit as challenging as anticipated. The Harris brothers were sullen and uncooperative, requiring constant vigilance. They made camp the first night in a sheltered draw, and Tessa found herself again impressed by Adam's methodical caution, the way he secured the prisoners without unnecessary cruelty, but with no opportunity for escape. As they sat by the fire after a simple meal, the Harris brothers tied securely nearby but out of earshot, Tessa finally asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. "What happens when we reach Fort Benton?" Adam poked at the fire with a stick. "The Harris brothers go to jail. I collect whatever bounty is on their heads." He glanced up at her. "As for you—" "As for me," Tessa interrupted, "I need to find work, a position somewhere. I have no family to return to, and no desire to go back east." "There's good people in Fort Benton," Adam said slowly. "I know a widow who runs a respectable boarding house. She might have work for you, at least temporarily." "And then what?" Tessa pressed. "I keep moving from town to town, always looking over my shoulder for Silas Blackstone." Adam's jaw tightened. "Blackstone's reach is long, but not infinite. Once word spreads that you're under protection." "Whose protection?" Tessa challenged. "Yours? Will you be staying in Fort Benton to ensure my safety?" A heavy silence fell between them. "I can't promise that," Adam finally said, his voice low. "My work takes me all over the territory." "I understand," Tessa said, trying to mask the disappointment in her voice. "You've already done more than enough. I have no right to expect anything more." "It's not a question of rights, Tessa," Adam said, meeting her gaze across the fire. "If I could stay, I would. But this life I lead, it's not one I'd ask anyone to share." "Perhaps you should let others decide what life they're willing to share," Tessa suggested quietly. Something flickered in Adam's eyes, a vulnerability that he quickly masked. "We should get some rest," he said, rising abruptly. "Tomorrow will be another long day." The conversation left Tessa with more questions than answers, but she recognized the walls Adam had erected. Whatever he might feel for her, he had clearly decided it couldn't or shouldn't lead anywhere. The second day of travel brought them within sight of Fort Benton by late afternoon. The town sprawled along the Missouri River, a bustling center of commerce where steamboats from St. Louis unloaded supplies bound for the Montana goldfields and surrounding territories. "We'll head straight for the marshal's office," Adam said as they approached the outskirts. "Best to get the Harris brothers safely locked up before word spreads of their capture." Tessa nodded, suddenly apprehensive about entering civilization again after days in the wilderness. In Fort Benton, she would once more be vulnerable not just to Silas Blackstone, but to the judgments and limitations society placed on women in her position. The marshal's office was a solid building on the town's main street. As they dismounted out front, a crowd began to gather, curious onlookers drawn by the sight of bound prisoners and Adam's authoritative manner. "Wait here," Adam instructed Tessa, helping her down from Thunder. "I'll handle this." He marched the Harris brothers inside, leaving Tessa to mind the horses and endure the scrutiny of passers-by. She held her head high, ignoring the whispers and stares her trail-worn appearance and unlikely company provoked. Adam emerged sometime later, looking satisfied. "It's done. Marshall had warrants for both of them. Seems they've been busy since their release 3 ranches hit in the past month. And the bounty? Tessa asked. $100 for the pair, Adam replied. Not much, but it'll keep us comfortable for a while. Us. The casual word sent an unexpected thrill through Tessa, though she tried not to read too much into it. What now? She asked. Now, Adam said, taking Thunder's reins, we find Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. Get you a proper bath and a decent meal, and figure out our next steps. They made their way through town, Adam occasionally nodding to acquaintances, but clearly not interested in lengthy conversations. Tessa sensed his discomfort in the crowded streets, the way his eyes continuously scanned for potential threats. Mrs. Henderson's establishment proved to be a tidy 2-story building on a quieter side street. The proprietress herself answered the door, a sturdy woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Adam Zachary, she greeted him, hands on hips. Been a while since you darkened my doorstep. And who's this you've brought with you? Tessa Jameson, Adam replied. She needs a room, a bath, and some new clothes if you can arrange it. I'll cover all expenses. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose as she assessed Tessa. Whatever she saw apparently met with approval, for she nodded briskly. Come in, child. You look like you've had quite an ordeal. Within the hour, Tessa found herself soaking in a steaming copper tub, the grime and weariness of the past days melting away. Mrs. Henderson had provided soap, towels, and the promise of clean clothing from a seamstress down the street who owed her a favor. Your gentleman friend settled the bill for a week's stay, the older woman informed her as she laid out a borrowed nightgown. Said to tell you he'd return this evening to check on you, but you're to rest meanwhile. He's not my... Tessa began, then stopped. What was Adam to her exactly? Rescuer, certainly. Protector, for now. But the complexity of her feelings toward him defied simple categorization. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. The older woman's eyes twinkled knowingly. Supper's at 6 sharp. I'll have a tray sent up if you're not feeling sociable. Left alone, Tessa finished her bath and dressed in the borrowed nightgown, her own clothing taken away for washing. The small but clean room with its simple furnishings felt like unimaginable luxury after days on the trail. She sat by the window, watching the street below as Fort Benton settled into evening routines, and wondered what would happen next. True to his word, Adam returned that evening. Tessa had just finished the generous supper Mrs. Henderson had sent up. Roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie when a knock came at her door. It's Adam! His voice came through the wood. Tessa quickly wrapped herself in the shawl Mrs. Henderson had loaned her and opened the door. Adam stood outside, freshly shaved and in clean clothing, his damp hair suggesting he too had enjoyed the luxury of a proper bath. He looked younger without the trail dust and stubble, but no less formidable. May I come in? He asked, hat in hand. Just for a moment. I know it's not proper, but I wanted to make sure you're settled. Tessa stepped aside to let him enter, leaving the door pointedly ajar to appease propriety. Mrs. Henderson has been very kind. Thank you for arranging everything. Adam nodded, looking somewhat uncomfortable in the small feminine space. I spoke with the marshal about Blackstone, he said without preamble. There's not much he can do. Officially, your stepfather had legal guardianship, and poker debts are considered binding in some circles. Tessa's heart sank. So I have no legal protection from him. I didn't say that, Adam corrected. The marshal's no friend to Blackstone. He's put out word that you're under his protection while in Fort Benton. It won't stop Blackstone entirely, but it might make him think twice about making a move in town. And outside of town? Tessa asked. Adam's expression hardened. That's where I come in. I've let it be known that anyone working for Blackstone who comes looking for you will answer to me. You can't watch over me forever, Adam, Tessa said softly. No, he agreed, but I can make sure you're safe until we find a more permanent solution. He hesitated, then added, I've been offered another job, escaped prisoner, last seen heading toward Idaho Territory. When would you leave? Tessa asked, trying to keep her voice steady. I haven't accepted yet, Adam said. Wanted to make sure you were settled first. Tessa turned away, blinking back unexpected tears. You should take the job. I'll be fine here with Mrs. Henderson. Tessa, Adam said, stepping closer. Look at me. She turned reluctantly, meeting his gaze. I don't want to leave you, he said simply. but I don't know any other way to live. This is who I am." "I understand," Tessa replied, though her heart protested otherwise. Adam studied her face, seeming to search for words. Finally, he sighed. "I should go. It's getting late, and Mrs. Henderson runs a respectable house." "When will you decide about the job?" Tessa asked as he moved toward the door. "Tomorrow," he answered. "Marshall needs an answer by noon." Tessa nodded, forcing a smile. "Then I hope we'll see each other before you go." Adam paused at the threshold, looking back at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Count on it," he said softly, then departed, closing the door gently behind him. Alone again, Tessa moved to the window, watching as Adam's tall figure emerged onto the street below. He stood for a moment, looking up at her window, then turned and walked away into the gathering darkness. Tessa pressed her fingers to the cool glass, a hollow feeling spreading in her chest. She had known from the beginning that their paths would eventually diverge. Adam was a man dedicated to his solitary profession, while she needed to build a new life from the ashes of her old one. Yet, in the few short days since her desperate leap from the train, something had grown between them, something neither had anticipated or sought. Tessa slept poorly that night, her dreams filled with rushing trains, falling sensations, and Adam's arms catching her before she could hit the ground. Morning came too quickly, sunlight streaming through the thin curtains to find her already awake and anxious about the day ahead. Mrs. Henderson had arranged for new clothing, as promised, a serviceable blue calico dress, fresh undergarments, and sturdy boots. Dressed in these, with her hair neatly arranged, Tessa felt almost herself again as she descended to the dining room for breakfast. Several other boarders were already at the long table, and Mrs. Henderson made brisk introductions. Tessa found herself seated beside a friendly young schoolteacher named Emily, and across from an elderly gentleman who worked at the land office. The normalcy of the scene, the clatter of cutlery, the passing of platters, the mundane conversation felt surreal after the dangers and intimacy of the past days. "Mr. Zachary asked me to tell you he'd call for you at 10, Mrs. Henderson informed her quietly as she refilled Tessa's coffee cup. "Said he has matters to discuss." Tessa nodded, her appetite suddenly diminished, despite the excellent food before her. In a few hours, Adam would likely tell her he was leaving to pursue this new bounty, and she would have to face her uncertain future alone. At precisely 10 o'clock, Mrs. Henderson showed Adam into the parlor where Tessa waited. He was dressed for travel, his familiar bounty hunter attire now clean but no less practical. The sight sent a pang through her heart. "You've decided to take the job?" she said, not a question. Adam nodded slowly. "Yes, but not in the way you might think." He crossed to sit beside her on the small sofa, close enough that she could catch the faint scent of soap and leather that she had come to associate with him. "I spoke with the marshal this morning," Adam began. "The bounty on this escaped prisoner is substantial $500, enough to make a difference." "A difference to what?" Tessa asked, puzzled. Adam took a deep breath. "To starting over, somewhere new, somewhere Blackstone's influence doesn't reach." Tessa stared at him, not daring to hope she understood his meaning. "Adam, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," he replied carefully, "that I've spent 4 years building a life suited for one person. A solitary hunter with no ties, no vulnerabilities an enemy could exploit." He met her gaze directly. "But since pulling you off that train, I've started to question whether that's really the life I want." "And what do you want?" Tessa whispered. Adam's hand moved to cover hers, warm and calloused. "I want to know if you'd consider coming with me. Not to chase this bounty, I'd never put you in that kind of danger again. But after, we could head west, maybe to Oregon Territory. I have some money saved, enough to buy a small place, start fresh." Tessa's heart raced. "As what, Adam? Partners? Friends?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I was thinking something more permanent, if you were amenable. But I know it's sudden. We've known each other less than a week." "I wouldn't blame you for thinking me presumptuous or worse." "Not presumptuous," Tessa assured him quickly. "Just unexpected." "For me as well," Adam admitted ruefully. "I've avoided entanglements for years, told myself it was better that way, safer." His fingers tightened slightly around hers. "Then you fell into my life quite literally, and suddenly being alone doesn't seem better at all." Tessa studied their joined hands, emotions warring within her. This bounty you're pursuing, it's dangerous? All bounties have their risks, Adam acknowledged. But this one's straightforward. The man's on foot, injured and leaving a clear trail. I expect to have him in custody within a week. And then what? We just go to Oregon and start a new life? Adam nodded. If that's what you want. Or we could stay in Montana, if you prefer. I've saved enough that we could build something, wherever we choose. As husband and wife? Tessa pressed, needing clarity. Adam's eyes held hers steadily. That would be my hope, yes. Though I know it's proper to court a woman before proposing marriage. I'm afraid circumstances haven't allowed for much propriety between us. A small laugh escaped Tessa. I'd say catching a woman mid-air as she jumps from a moving train supersedes the need for formal courtship. Adam smiled, a real smile that transformed his face and made Tessa's heart skip. Is that a yes, then? It's a come back safely from this last job, and we'll see what future we might build together, Tessa replied, squeezing his hand. I care for you, Adam, more than I thought possible in so short a time. But I won't have you making promises based on gratitude or obligation. There's gratitude, Adam acknowledged, but what I feel goes well beyond obligation, Tessa. He hesitated, then leaned forward, his free hand gently touching her cheek. May I? Tessa nodded, and he closed the distance between them, his lips finding hers in a kiss that began hesitantly but quickly deepened with shared emotion. When they finally parted, Tessa felt breathless and more certain than ever that whatever this was between them, it was worth pursuing. I'll return in a week, Adam promised, reluctantly releasing her hand as he stood. 10 days at the most. Will you wait for me? I will, Tessa said. But be careful, Adam. I've only just found you. I'm not ready to lose you. His expression softened. I've got more reason to come back safely than I've ever had before. That makes a man cautious. They parted at Mrs. Henderson's front door, Adam touching his hat, in a gesture that had become achingly familiar. Tessa watched him mount Thunder and ride away, torn between hope for their future and fear that she might never see him again. The days of Adam's absence crawled by with agonizing slowness. Tessa occupied herself by helping Mrs. Henderson with the boarding house, discovering she had a knack for organization and accounts that the older woman greatly appreciated. The work kept her busy during daylight hours, but evenings were lonely, filled with worry about Adam and uncertainty about their future. On the 5th day, unexpected news arrived that changed everything. Telegram for you, Miss Jameson, Mrs. Henderson announced, entering the kitchen where Tessa was preparing vegetables for supper. Tessa wiped her hands on her apron, puzzled. For me? Who would be sending me a telegram? Doesn't say, Mrs. Henderson replied, handing her the sealed envelope. Boy brought it from the telegraph office just now. With trepidation, Tessa opened the message. Blackstone spotted in Fort Benton. Stop, stay inside. Stop returning. Immediately. Stop Adam. Bad news? Mrs. Henderson asked, noting Tessa's pallor. Silas Blackstone is in town, Tessa explained, her voice tight. The man I was fleeing when I met Adam. Mrs. Henderson's expression hardened. The one who bought you from your stepfather? I've heard whispers. She took the telegram, reading it quickly. Well, he won't find you here. I'll bolt the doors and tell the other boarders we've got rats in the cellar that'll keep everyone inside tonight. And I keep a shotgun behind the counter for unwelcome visitors. Tessa managed a weak smile at the older woman's ferocity. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Martha, the woman corrected. Any girl Adam Zachary is sweet on can call me Martha. She patted Tessa's hand. Now, help me finish these potatoes, then we'll secure the house. That night, Tessa lay awake in her room, listening to every creak and rustle in the old house, imagining Silas Blackstone's heavy tread on the stairs. Rationally, she knew the boarding house was secure, with Martha stationed downstairs with her shotgun, but fear wasn't rational, and the memory of Silas's cold eyes and possessive grip was too fresh to dismiss. Dawn was just breaking when a commotion in the street below drew Tessa to the window. Through the early morning mist, she could make out several figures on horseback approaching the boarding house. Her heart leaped when she recognized Adam among them, but her relief quickly turned to dread when she realized the man riding beside him was none other than Silas Blackstone himself. Throwing on a wrapper over her nightgown, Tessa rushed downstairs to find Martha already at the front door, shotgun in hand. "Stay back, Tessa," the older woman warned. "Something's not right." Before Tessa could respond, a knock came at the door. "Mrs. Henderson, it's Adam Zachary." Martha cracked the door, keeping the shotgun visible. "State your business, Mr. Zachary, and explain your company." "I need to speak with Tessa." Adam's voice came through the gap. "It's important." "Let him in, Martha," Tessa said, moving forward. "But just him." Martha reluctantly widened the door enough for Adam to enter, then promptly closed and bolted it behind him. He stood in the entryway, travel-worn and grim, his eyes immediately finding Tessa's. "What's happening?" Tessa demanded. "Why is Silas Blackstone with you?" Adam's expression was carefully neutral. "He claims you're his legal property, Tessa. Says he has paperwork from your stepfather transferring guardianship." "That's absurd," Tessa exclaimed. "I'm 22 years old. No one can have guardianship over me." "That's what I told him," Adam agreed. "But he's got a judge's order saying otherwise. Claims your stepfather declared you mentally unfit after your mother's death, and the court appointed him your legal guardian." Tessa staggered backward, gripping a chair for support. "It's a lie, all of it." "I know that," Adam said quietly. "But he's got the paperwork, and he's got the marshal convinced. For now." "So what does he want?" Martha demanded, still clutching her shotgun. "He wants Tessa," Adam replied, his voice hardening. "But he's willing to negotiate." "Negotiate?" Tessa repeated incredulously. "I'm not a sack of flour to be bartered over." Adam moved closer, lowering his voice. "I need you to trust me, Tessa. I have a plan, but it requires you to come outside and face Blackstone." "Absolutely not," Martha declared. "The girl stays here." "Martha, please," Adam said, turning to the older woman. "I've never given you reason to doubt me. Don't start now." Martha studied him intently, then looked to Tessa. "It's your decision, child, but whatever you choose, I'll back you." Tessa took a deep breath, looking into Adam's eyes. Whatever his plan was, she could see he was asking her to have faith in him one more time. "I trust you, Adam," she said finally. "Let me get dressed." 10 minutes later, Tessa stood on the porch of the boarding house, Adam's solid presence beside her, a small comfort as she faced the man who had purchased her like livestock. Silas Blackstone sat astride a large bay horse, flanked by two rough-looking men she recognized as his ranch hands. Behind them, a small crowd of townspeople had gathered, drawn by the early morning drama. "There she is," Blackstone announced, a triumphant smile spreading across his fleshy face. "My wayward ward, safe and sound." He turned to the marshal, who stood nearby, looking uncomfortable. "I'll be taking her back to Butte now, Marshal. Appreciate your assistance in this delicate family matter." "She's not going anywhere with you, Blackstone," Adam stated flatly. Blackstone's smile hardened. "The lady has no say in the matter, Zachary. The law's on my side. Now, step aside." "The law protects citizens," Adam countered, "not men who purchase women for immoral purposes." A murmur ran through the gathered crowd. "Careful with your accusations," Blackstone warned. "I've got documents signed by a territorial judge saying this woman is mentally unsound and in need of supervision. You're interfering with a legal guardian's rights." "Those documents," Adam said clearly, ensuring his voice carried to the crowd, "were obtained through fraud and corruption. Judge Hanson is known to sign anything if the price is right." The marshal shifted uncomfortably. "That's a serious allegation, Zachary." "With serious evidence to back it," Adam replied. He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded paper. "This is a statement from Tessa's family physician in Helena, certifying her to be of sound mind and body. And this," he produced another document, "is a telegram from the circuit judge in Helena, overriding Judge Hanson's guardianship order pending full investigation." Blackstone's face darkened. "You're bluffing." "Read them yourself, Marshal," Adam invited, handing the papers over. The lawman scanned the documents, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "These appear authentic, Blackstone. The circuit judge has suspended Hanson's order." "This is outrageous," Blackstone sputtered. "The girl is mine. I paid good money." He cut himself off, realizing his error too late. "You paid her stepfather," Adam finished for him, "which constitutes human trafficking, a federal offense carrying a minimum sentence of 10 years in prison." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, the sentiment clearly shifting against Blackstone. "You can't prove anything," Blackstone hissed. "Actually," a new voice joined the conversation, "he can." All eyes turned to see a well-dressed man stepping forward from the crowd. "Edward Prescott, U.S. Marshals Service." He introduced himself, displaying a badge. "I've been tracking reports of women being sold into servitude in this territory for 6 months. Mr. Zachary has been kind enough to assist our investigation." Tessa looked at Adam in astonishment. This had been his plan all along, not just to protect her from Blackstone, but to bring the man to justice. "Silas Blackstone," Prescott continued formally, "you are under arrest for violation of the federal peonage law of 1867, prohibiting the holding of any person to a condition of involuntary servitude for debt." Blackstone's face contorted with rage. He reached for the pistol at his hip, but before he could draw, Adam's gun was already leveled at his chest. "I wouldn't," Adam advised quietly. "You're already facing prison. Don't make it worse." For a tense moment, Tessa feared Blackstone would force Adam to shoot him, but self-preservation won out, and he slowly raised his hands. "This isn't over, girl," he snarled at Tessa. "Not by a long shot." "Actually," Adam corrected him, "it is. Marshal Prescott, I believe this concludes our arrangement." Prescott nodded, signaling his deputies to take Blackstone and his men into custody. "It does indeed, Mr. Zachary. The Justice Department appreciates your assistance in this matter. The reward will be processed as agreed." As Blackstone was led away in handcuffs, the tension drained from Tessa's body so suddenly that her knees buckled. Adam caught her easily, his arm secure around her waist. "You planned this," she said, looking up at him in wonder. "All of it." "Not all," Adam admitted. "I was genuinely pursuing that bounty when I got word Blackstone was headed for Fort Benton. I knew we needed more than just my word against his, so I contacted Prescott. He's been building a case against Blackstone and men like him for months. So there never was a legal guardianship order." "Oh, there was," Adam said grimly. "Your stepfather really did sell you, with all the corrupt paperwork to make it look legitimate. But Prescott had already convinced the circuit judge to invalidate Hanson's rulings, pending investigation into corruption charges." Tessa shook her head in disbelief. "You risked everything on this plan. What if it hadn't worked?" Adam's arm tightened around her waist. "Then we would have run. I had Thunder and 2 fresh horses ready behind the livery stable. One way or another, Tessa, you weren't going back to Blackstone, not while I draw breath." The fervor in his voice made her heart swell. Standing on the porch of Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, surrounded by curious onlookers, Tessa did what any sensible woman would do in her position. She stretched up on her tiptoes and kissed Adam Zachary full on the mouth. A cheer went up from the crowd, and Mrs. Henderson's exasperated, "Well, I never," only made Tessa smile against Adam's lips. When they finally broke apart, Adam looked slightly dazed but undeniably pleased. "I take it you approve of my methods, Miss Jameson?" "I approve of you, Mr. Zachary," Tessa replied, suddenly unconcerned with propriety or public opinion. "Every stubborn, noble, risk-taking inch of you." Adam's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "In that case," he said, reaching into his pocket and dropping to one knee right there on the porch, "I have one more question to ask you." Gasps and excited murmurs rippled through the watching crowd as Adam opened a small box to reveal a simple gold band. "Tessa Jameson," he said, his voice steady but his eyes betraying his nervousness. "I know it's sudden, I know we've known each other just 2 weeks, but in that time, you've shown more courage and spirit than most people demonstrate in a lifetime. I can't promise an easy life, but I can promise to catch you whenever you fall for as long as we both live." He took a breath. "Will you marry me?" Tessa couldn't have stopped her smile if she tried. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will." As Adam slipped the ring onto her finger and the crowd erupted in applause, Tessa marveled at how quickly life could change. 2 weeks ago, she had jumped from a train, choosing certain death over captivity. Instead, she had found freedom, justice, and a love she had never dared to dream possible. Adam rose to his feet, gathering her close, his forehead pressed to hers. "Thank you for saying yes," he murmured, just for her ears. "Thank you for being there to catch me," Tessa whispered back. 3 days later, Tessa Jameson became Tessa Zachary in a simple ceremony at Fort Benton's small church. Martha Henderson provided the wedding breakfast at her boarding house, and Marshall Prescott gave the bride away. Adam, looking distinctly uncomfortable in a new suit, but undeniably handsome, couldn't take his eyes off his bride in her borrowed blue dress with a crown of wildflowers in her hair. "You're sure about Oregon?" Adam asked as they prepared to depart the following morning. Their few possessions packed onto a sturdy wagon Adam had purchased with part of his reward money. "We could stay in Montana if you prefer." Tessa shook her head, looking out at the horizon. "Oregon means a fresh start, for both of us." She turned to him, taking his hand. "Though I have to admit, I'm a little anxious about the journey." Adam's fingers tightened around hers. "Don't worry about falling, Tessa. I'll always be there to catch you." As their wagon rolled out of Fort Benton, heading west toward the setting sun and their future together, Tessa knew with absolute certainty that Adam's promise was one she could trust for the rest of her days. 5 years later, Adam Zachary stood on the porch of a modest farmhouse in Oregon's Willamette Valley, watching as his wife chased their 3-year-old son through rows of ripening corn. Tessa's laughter carried across the field, mingling with little James's delighted squeals as she caught him and swung him into the air. Adam smiled, content in a way he would never have believed possible during his solitary bounty hunting days. The farm was prospering, with good crops and a growing herd of horses that Adam bred and trained. Tessa had found her calling as well, teaching at the local schoolhouse 3 days a week, and tending a thriving garden that supplied their table and provided extra income at the weekly market. "Papa," James called, spotting him on the porch. "Come play." Adam didn't need to be asked twice. He descended the steps and jogged toward his family, scooping his son into one arm and wrapping the other around Tessa's waist. "You're home early," she observed, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "Finished the last horse sooner than expected," Adam replied. "Thought I'd surprise you." "A wonderful surprise," Tessa said, leaning into his embrace. "And perfect timing. I have news." Something in her tone made Adam study her face more closely. "News?" Tessa's smile was radiant as she guided his free hand to rest against her stomach. "James is going to be a big brother, come winter." Joy surged through Adam, so intense it nearly brought him to his knees. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be," Tessa confirmed. "Dr. Lewis confirmed it yesterday when I was in town." Adam set James down gently, then gathered Tessa in his arms, lifting her off the ground in his enthusiasm. "I love you," he said fervently, "more than I have words to express." "I know," Tessa replied softly. "I've always known from the moment you caught me." As the small family made their way back to the farmhouse, the setting sun casting long shadows across their land, Adam reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had led to this moment. A desperate woman's leap from a train, a bounty hunter in the right place at the right time, a chance to catch someone falling, not just physically, but emotionally as well. Sometimes the greatest journeys began with a single, terrifying step into the unknown. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, someone was waiting below to catch you when you fell.